Welcome, folks. Welcome to Endgame. Tonight we'll be talking about selecting your reality with our host Popopo, and I will be guest hosting. My name is Laozi, which just feel free to pronounce that any way you like. I prefer Laozi. And shall we start the show?
Job.
Yeah, let's
That's
get
right.
started. Okay.
That's
Thanks.
the first pun of the night. Keep them coming.
There's no
That's
end
the
to them.
intent. Yes, there's no end to the lousy puns.
So you are, so this is Laozi. He is actually a member of the Endgame crew. He is the one who's responsible for building this world. I've made some updates to it since then, but he's responsible for the way it looks and how awesome it is. So, but it's beautiful. But we haven't seen you in a while, and and sort of the reason for that is part of the reason for our topic tonight.
That's right.
So why exactly haven't we seen us or like anyone in VR chat? Why have we missed out on you for the last little while?
Why have I not been in VR chat? Because I have now played. I am approaching 400 hours in Skyrim VR. So that is why I have not been. Yeah. So I'm sure. So go ahead.
Oh, how many hours do you have in VR chat?
479. So, but that was before the Skyrim. But that's all the way going all the way back to February of 2018 or 2017. Mm-hmm. When did they do the Steam launch? Yeah, a while back.
Yeah.
All right. So, do you want me to just kind of introduce what we talked about, and then we'll go from there?
Yeah, please do.
All right. So, selecting your reality. The reason Popopo and I were talking about what we wanted to do kind of for this show, and for me, the reason I mentioned Skyrim VR is because I've wanted VR since I saw Tron or whatever since I was very little. I've imagined, yes, we're going to live in VR one day. It's going to be awesome. And then VR came out, and it was cool. There was VR chat, there was other apps. But I had never encountered anything that approached the sort of stories that I'd grown up with, right? Where people there's a reason to be in VR, like 24/7 or something. Why would you do that? Because there were lots of cool apps, but there's nothing that was going to keep me in and keep me invested for a long period of time. And so I picked up Skyrim VR when it came out. And this is not to say that Skyrim VR is any better or any worse than other experiences, or that it's particularly, unique in the fact that, though it does have some of the most content that you can get in VR these days, but playing it and, investing all this time in it and finding that I was really looking forward to getting back into it, it kind of hit me that this is the proof that, at least as I see it, I think once VR gets compelling enough, once we have haptics, once it's largely indistinguishable from reality, I think it's very possible that people will essentially ditch existing reality, the meat space essentially, and just say, I just want to be in VR all the time. So the quote I wanted to bring up, I know many of you have seen The Matrix, so I like this quote that I've got on my desktop, so let me make sure I can read it. So this is Cypher, and Cypher was talking to one of the agents. He's he's about to betray Morpheus. He's in the restaurant. He says, I know this steak doesn't exist. I know that when I put it in my mouth, the Matrix is telling my brain that it is juicy and delicious. After 9 years, you know what I realize? Ignorance is bliss. And he's basically saying, I don't want to live in this, on this little ship in the cold, in the dark, eating slop, when my brain can tell me that I'm living in New York eating steak every day. And so what Skyrim kind of made me think about is that we will want, so we will want to, when it is available, we will want to transition, or many of us, not all of us, but many of us will want to transition into a virtual world and be there full time, because why not?
So I feel like kind of in a way we're already kind of seeing that, right? Because this is related to a book I started to read called Reality is Broken. I kind of mentioned it to you a little bit, but so the book is about game design and sociology. So it talks about how the way our society is changing in regard to gameplay, where through most of the years of human activity, most of human activity has been devoted to surviving, farming, raising families, honing your trade or whatever it is, like all these kind of necessity-based activities. And now that we have such a we have such a monetary surplus, and we've got the Industrial Revolution, and we've got a calorie surplus, and just all these different things. Our leisure time has grown and I think they said like there's a significant portion of the population that spends as much time playing video games as they do in a part-time job. So like 20 hours a week is like not, it's a very common amount of time for like a gamer to spend in reality. So that means like a chunk of the population is like just pouring all their time and energy and like conscious existence into these digital worlds, which I guess is what you're talking about, but like it seems to be getting more pronounced, or could get more pronounced as VR kind of starts to take hold.
Progresses, yeah. And I would bet a lot of people in here probably spend a significant number of hours in VR chat as an example, or other VR apps. So to be clear, just to make sure I know what kind of, or building stuff for it. So just to be clear, to know how I'm framing this, I'm not saying that Skyrim VR is the app that makes me want to stay in VR forever. It's not. We're not nearly there yet. All I'm saying is that in modding it up and playing it and having as much fun as I did with just, a 10-year-old game, granted it's been modded graphically, but it's a 10-year-old game. It has relatively primitive inputs as far as compared to real life. We don't have haptics yet. We don't have any of the additional inputs that you would have in, say, something like The Matrix. But even with this small window into, this is a game you can easily sink, 400, 500, 600 hours into if you want to do everything. Once you make it look incredibly immersive and gorgeous, I do feel the desire, like, I want to go and play a couple hours of Skyrim. Like, it's pretty common. And it's only slacked off now that I'm up to about 400 hours. Now I can actually manage it a little better. I'm like, I'm going to play an hour or two tonight. That's about it.
Okay. So now you mentioned the inputs thing, and that kind of makes me think of Cypher again, because like in the Matrix, I like to some degree I can understand his choice, but to another degree, like what he seems to be suggesting is that sensory experience is the end all be all of reality, and like that's what's, I guess, important to him is whether he experiences physical pleasure or physical pain, and like that's what he's to reduce discomfort was his goal, and to reduce it enough that like he was willing to have his memory wiped and plugged back in to a machine is kind of like, I feel like that's a little bit antithetical to what you're talking about, because there's this experience that you're having that is not it isn't sensory primarily. Like there's a visual component, obviously, but mostly it's an emotional experience. It's a narrative that you're progressing through. It's an interactive experience, and it seems like it's emotionally engaging, not just that it like satisfies. You're not eating steak for real in Skyrim, but it's still satisfying to you.
Oh yeah, as we're talking about, what makes Skyrim appealing. So yes, it is the fact that, and again, this is the number of mods, and this is looking at the primitive stuff that is already there. Like as an example, Skyrim VR does eye tracking. So, or not eye tracking, but when you're talking to an NPC, the game by default knows where your head is, so they make eye contact. And even having an NPC that's talking while making eye contact with you automatically increases your immersion. There's one of the mods I downloaded allows you to speak your lines back. You don't have to click a text prompt. You can actually just say aloud what you want to say, and the NPC will respond naturally, and you can have a conversation. So there's all sorts of little tricks. Yeah, there's all sorts of little tricks that Skyrim does that, again, I'm looking at this as like, to take an example of where I would compare it to, I'll date myself. I'm 40, I'm about to be 41, so that'll give you about how old I am. So maybe 30 years ago, or a little less than that, I was playing the Atari 2600, for anybody who remembers that. Little Atari 2600 on a little TV, maybe like 64 pixels, and a little less than 30 years later, I'm in VR with you guys. So that's 30 years to progress from Atari 2600 to the experience we are all having now. And for that reason, it seems very plausible to me that in another 30 years, or even 20, or even 10, that VR will continue to advance to the point where we already have prototypes for haptics. We already have prototypes for simulating hot and cold. We already have prototypes for producing smells. If anybody saw the most recent release from Google, they have prototyped motorized shoes. Has anybody seen those? It's a really cool idea. Basically, it's shoes with little wheels on them. And when you walk, the shoes rotate their wheels to keep you from going anywhere. So rather than a 360 treadmill, you simply put on these shoes, and anytime you walk, the wheels move to basically keep you in place. So
wait, how well does that work?
It's just a patent. They haven't released it yet. But it's a patent from Google, to be fair. So and of course Facebook recently patented their what they call the Retinal resolution display, where they're using a single micro display. It's a tiny display that they then use. They have a mirror hooked up to it. So if you imagine a large display that handles everything around here, and then the tiny display uses a mirror and eye tracking to redirect that tiny display to wherever the center of your vision is. And that creates a much higher resolution image for you to stare at. So it's essentially using eye tracking to, and as they see it, with this method, they could actually make photorealistic VR possible. That's one way they can do it. So, and the things that make me feel excited about it, well, and also think that's plausible, is there's two things that VR has going for it right now. One is that the developers who are working on it are very, very passionate about it. You know, everybody who's working in VR, I think, does it because they want to advance VR. They want it to work well. But that's not enough. But fortunately for them, it can also be exceedingly profitable. Which is why you saw Facebook buying Oculus and such. So I think the combination of the fact that you have extremely passionate developers and lots of people who know that they can make money off of it, those two things together mean that you're going to compare something like, again, looking at television sets, right? So television sets 50 years ago, you had a giant wooden box with a tiny little black and white screen. And 50 years later, we have, 80-inch flat screen that you can mount on your wall. So just by just how quickly technology progresses, I think it's quite possible that within 20 to 30 years or sooner, we will have a VR experience that is compelling enough, paired with an experience like Skyrim, that people will say, I'm done with reality. I'm going to sleep, I'm going to eat, and I'm going to spend the rest of my time in VR with my virtual friends who love me and, be the Dovahkiin and save Tamriel. Because my real life is boring.
So tell me this though. So like we're developing all these technologies. We're starting to build haptics. We're simulating movement. We're developing displays that will display things to us in high fidelity. Like what the fact that we're just trying to simulate the real world, like doesn't that mean that the real world is what we really want?
Well, I don't think we are simulating the real world. Do you have a question? Or are you just standing? Are you standing in line waiting? Or are you just standing there?
Oh. They look like they're...
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure.
If you have something to say, just go ahead and stand right here and join in on the conversation if you guys have any input.
I do have a question.
What was your... Yeah, sure. Well, let's answer that, but
It actually intrigues into your question, like what you're talking about. Have you ever seen Sword Art, the anime?
Yes. Sword Art Online, yes.
Is that what you're actually expecting of VR? Because honestly, one day that would be pretty cool to actually see.
Yeah, I think something like Sword Art Online or The Matrix is possible someday. I don't see it in that same 30-year period that I see current VR developing. What I see in 30 years, and again, this is just my uneducated guess, but what I see is in 30 years we will easily have something like what's coming out next year. It's called the Oculus. It's not the Oculus Go. It's the new Oculus set. The Quest. Yes. Yeah, Quest. The Quest, completely self-contained headset, 6 degrees of freedom. That's within 2019. We already have that. So I think easily in 30 years, we have the plug-and-play headset from Ready Player One. He just puts it on, and it's essentially photorealistic. We have haptic suits that simulate all of the sensations that you would expect. We probably have other devices that I haven't even occurred to me. Like the idea of the motorized shoes, like I never would have even thought of that until Google mentioned that. And I'm like, if that works, that's like brilliant. So I think that we'll usually have those. And again, this is bringing it back to Skyrim VR. The Skyrim is fun enough with just what we have now that like I want to spend a lot of time there. So I'm imagining the next AAA experience built on the level of Skyrim for VR with all the haptics, with all the advanced technology being such a compelling experience that people will just like, I'm going to spend all my time here.
So tell me, Superb, if Sword Art Online or something, comparable, were to be developed, Is that where you'd spend all your time? What would you do with that?
It would be. I would
Yeah.
spend all my time in it, and I spend 90% of my time actually sitting in front of the
Now,
computer
where would
screen on it.
you? What would you get from that experience that you feel that you wouldn't get from real life? You think?
That I wouldn't be restricted to life as much as I am.
So you're saying you'd have a lot of freedom in this digital world to do whatever you like.
Yes.
Hmm.
And
I
a lot
find that
of
kind of
fun too. Like
interesting.
it's not fun to work in a spreadsheet all day. It's fun to go beat up dragons and fight goblins
Sure.
and cast spells. Like
That's fair.
there will be an experience for everyone. Someone may like fantasy, someone may like sci-fi, someone may like again, it may actually be a real life simulator, but it's a life where you're like a movie star. That might be like now you are a pop idol and like you go to concerts and everybody like a Guitar Hero. Like Guitar Hero kind of does that already.
No,
but there will be all these
no.
experiences that people want to do that are not their existing life.
Is that really freedom though? Because whenever you go into an app, whenever you go into Skyrim or even VR chat, whenever you go into, what you can do and how you can interface with the world is constricted to the imagination of the people who built it. The system physically won't allow any interaction in Skyrim, for instance, that the programmers didn't specifically program in. So is that really freedom? It seems a little limiting to be completely contained to someone else's imagination.
I don't think it's freedom. I think it's something. It's appeal. It's like it's compelling enough. And I base this on, and let's take some questions too because we've got a good line. But I want to say I base this on people who got addicted to Second Life as an example. People who have played World of Warcraft. People who have played. We already have in flat screen MMOs. We do have people who've gotten to the point where we would say it's unhealthy because they're playing it so much, and those were flat screen experiences. So again, using Skyrim VR this is an example of what it could be in the future. Even this experience in this input method is compelling enough that I feel that a future experience that is advanced, that has all of the things that we lack now and is designed for VR is going to be 10x more compelling. And thus, be something. So it's not freedom, it's a pleasure. It's like I would prefer to spend my time there because this is more fun than the daily grind of my life. So do you want to get some questions?
Catapult.
Laozi, like you were saying just a while ago, some of the technologies that they're working on between haptics and eye tracking, the smell thing, the wind thing, those are fairly easy to emulate. The one that's going to be the deal breaker is gravity. G-forces. It's the same thing in sim racing. Like sim racing, you can spend $10,000 and get a full motion cockpit. This thing will actually throw you around. You're not actually feeling G-forces. You're just getting thrown around. In a race car, when you go around a corner, you can feel like 3 to 5 Gs, depending on your speed and so on, and the grip of the car. But it's the same thing. It's the same thing in VR. Some of these roller coaster experiences. That's why it's so easy to get nauseous in VR, because your brain is telling your body you should feel really light because you're going down really fast, and all of a sudden you should feel really heavy because you're going up really fast. And stuff like this, and your body's not feeling any of that. That's why it kind of messes you up.
I think it's possible though that I don't know, even if we never accurately simulate G-forces, and that's, eventually when it plugs into our brains, they'll be able to simulate whatever we want.
That's about it. Yeah, that's about it. It's when they sorry.
I think getting any feedback from a virtual environment is satisfying. Like whether it accurately simulates real life or not, feeling myself reach out and be able to interface with the world and it give some feedback, even just going around through VR chat and feeling the haptics in my controllers. The Oculus release recently changed the way my hand controllers feel when I mouse over something. It vibrates differently, and so I'm finding that my physical, my tactile experience of VR chat is different than it was before. And so it's I don't know, that doesn't simulate anything in real life, but I still feel like it's a sensory element of my experience.
And I think we will all adjust. The gravity thing you mentioned, I think now you can move around naturally, right? In VR chat, you don't have to use the hollow port. You can just slide everywhere, and it doesn't make you nauseous anymore. there was an adjustment
Well,
period.
you
I
get
was the same way.
You
Yeah,
get used
so
to it. Yeah.
yeah, so I think
humans are very adaptable.
we can adjust to anything. Yeah, we'll adjust.
But-
So
but
do we
the
want to
thing-
get? Do
but
we
the
want to get
thing-
the next?
But the thing that
Well,
would be
one
cool
last
is
point,
being
Kenneth.
able to
Let's get
feel
the
gravity.
line behind you. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, be feel gravity. Yeah, your turn. All right.
Well, yeah, and I was about to say something in regards to that too. But I think one of the
Mhm.
things that I actually you were mentioning earlier about pleasure and being able to get into VR outside of that. Like you come into VR for the idea of escaping from something. But what about the people who actually want to come into VR as their own job? See, I actually
Mhm.
live with somebody who streams VR chat, and it basically is his job. He doesn't leave the house. He doesn't need to because he does his job in VR. He puts on the headset and it's like he's going to work. We actually call the living room our studio right now. And even
Mhm.
I got into full body because I like the idea of playing VR so much that it eventually becomes a full-time job. So you mentioned the whole idea of putting on a headset not only as pleasure, but do you think there will be more and more jobs that come in a virtual sense?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Do
I
you know?
I don't know what they are yet, but I'm sure we will find ways to take advantage of it.
Say like streamers are like they're in an entertainment role, and that seems to be like the main I guess the main conduit right now for monetization for anybody who's not actively developing VR games. But like that's something that I wish I had in VR. One of the I have some difficulties just hanging out and socializing sometimes because I don't have anything to do. Like in real life, I can usually have some sort of like task to accomplish or something, or like I bring a sketchbook or something, but I don't have anything to do in VR yet, and it would be really satisfying to have that.
You mentioned about the idea of entertainers, and I do agree with you on that. But I also think about artists. Graphical artists could easily use VR as a means to virtually draw something in a much easier way than what was possible with just a pen and pad kind of deal like we're currently using for a lot of 3D stuff. And I also see that there's going to be the possibility of a medical field. You've got people who are doing recovery from injuries and such, and they can go ahead and use VR to get that kind of simulation instead of always having something in front of them. They can virtually have a haptic feel of getting something back without having to constantly have that kind of thing up. So there are fields where I'm seeing. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, one of our episodes recently was from a biovisualization expert who talked about like using VR and 3D to model to model biological systems and how that can give us like additional insights into them.
And again, with that whole, like you're saying about biological insights on such, imagine being able to see a DNA strand in a virtual world and being able to look at the details, plus any kind of like maybe viruses or other kind of things to figure out the structure, or even our own technologies, nanotubes. The idea of something so small, but then maybe making that a larger scale that then people can see up close, they can actually utilize that to their advantage, seeing it in a 3D space, not just on a screen, but tactically see it 3D.
Yeah.
Yep.
I like that.
Yeah. No. To answer your question, I think it's. Yeah, I think it's quite. I think you're correct. I think that any job that can be done in VR, once they figure out, once the employers figure out that it's better, it's less cost to them to or to whoever wants to do it to jump in VR. The VR chat staff is actually a great example of that. For those who don't know, most of the VR chat development staff do not live on site. They do not really have a building per se, other than a couple of folks. They live all over the world, and they come in and they work in VR. So that's a perfect example.
Okay.
You want to get the?
That was my main thing.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Skeleton. All right, Hap.
All right.
very
So
sad.
with what you've been, what
We're
you've
happy.
been saying, so with what's been happening, you all say it'd be great, photorealistic stuff in VR. So, but you think of some of those things, there are medical conditions like epilepsy, right? And you know how in all virtual things there are people who do try to cause harm to others. If something was so photorealistic that it could have those kind of problems, how do you think that could really affect the development of stuff?
So I think that's it's going to affect what you do. So the way I see the future of VR development is kind of like it is now, where we have a bunch of different apps. So VR chat is a choice that a lot of us make because we want to socialize. And I think people who are cautious about, like you said, about have epilepsy, if they think someone can harm them, they will probably choose a different experience. They will choose either an experience with locked avatars or just a single player game. So yes, I think I think what it is there will be, like you're saying, you want something to do, right? Socializing is fun, but it would be nice if there was something to do as well. And I think what happens is because the entertainment value is there, that the large studios already know that there's money to be made. If the next person, the first person who creates World of Warcraft essentially in VR, after we have consumer headsets that are as easy as plug and play, put on, that company is going to be ridiculously rich. Like, we're talking Bezos bucks. Like, they're going to have a ridiculous amount of money. So I think development companies are aware of that, and everybody's chasing it. Nobody knows what it is yet, but I think somebody's going to figure it out. And then they may have a bunch of different experiences. Like I said, fantasy, sci-fi, pop star, cooking, whatever they think people will be interested in, that world will be available. Kind of like Ready Player One.
Yeah. I had another question, but I'll let him go first since he's been waiting.
Yep.
So
welcome back,
I
Superb.
actually had another on top of what we were talking about earlier.
Well, that's perfect. You looped around, so good job.
How it works, for me at least, if VR became like that, it would actually benefit me, since technically the right side of my whole body is disabled.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
But I can still move around and like walk and stuff, but I'm very movement restricted. Like right now it's cold. It's very hard for me to get around my house because of my knees, my shoulder, my arm draws up and stuff like that. So do you see, if VR became a full thing, would it actually benefit people more, or would it make it worse?
I think it already does. Like, I know a lot of people who have said, like who they have something that in their real life that they have they have to do a bit more than other people do, because of either they're in a wheelchair or other reasons, and so they have said VR is great for them because it makes them feel like they can move about, right?
We were talking earlier about, or you mentioned earlier, pieces of fiction that kind of formed your idea of what VR would be. And have you read the book series Otherland?
No, I actually struggle with reading.
Okay. There's this character in there who has this condition where he's like a kid, but his body like ages rapidly. And so he can't do much physically, and he gets really winded and everything. And so in the book, there's this kind of there's this VR environment that has basically taken over the entire world. It's basically as thoroughly as the internet has for us, but in VR, and everybody does everything in VR. And so like that piece of fiction where he goes in and he plays like a fantasy game, very similar to World of Warcraft probably, and he like role plays and gets into his character and like lives like this much richer and fuller life than he might be able to get in physical reality, because he just can't go very far without having health problems. And so like in that respect, I can definitely see how that would be freedom, but it's like, I don't know. To me, I guess I worry that it's like a, I don't know.
It would get abused too much.
It will. I think it will.
Yeah.
But then again, we'll have to decide what is abuse, right? Like if your emotional needs are being met, we would say, oh, you're spending all your time in VR, so that's unhealthy. But if all of your needs are being met and you're mentally more healthy than you would be otherwise, is it? It's going to be a question that I think will start to. Perspectives will change or not. I don't know.
That is a question. Like, what are our emotional needs as human beings? Like, and is that like, regardless of, I guess, there's questions about health and what's healthy for us and what's physically healthy for us, what's emotionally healthy for us, and then there's also the question that like, if we're meeting our emotional health needs, is that enough? Is that good enough?
That's actually the other thing I want to. So let's take another question in a second. But I want to transition into something else that I want to mention in reference to Skyrim as well. Just because. Okay. So we talked about. This is the other topic I wanted to hit, and I think this is probably from here we'll just go. But the other thing we talked about was obviously the visuals. It's visual. It's fun. But the other thing that again I noticed in Skyrim once it's modded is I play with a mod because I feel lonely in Skyrim. I don't want to adventure by myself. I play with a mod that lets me run with 4 or 5 followers. It's kind of like playing Dragon Age where I have a whole party. And again. There's a few very small things that Skyrim followers do that are super primitive. With the mods, they will occasionally make comments as if they're commenting about the world. By default, when I look at them, they will look at me. They will make eye contact. Quite often, because it detects that I've looked at them, they'll say something like, "Oh, hey, do you need something?" Or, "Oh, what's going on?" You know, we have this very simple interplay that I know is scripted, but even that small amount of interplay still makes me feel a level of attachment to this character, like this companion that I've been adventuring through. I understand their AI. I understand it's just this very simple interaction, but I'm like, oh yeah, you know, you're my friend. And so if you look at all of the other things that we've had recently, the advance in chatbots, the advance in text-to-speech, the advance in, you know, all sorts of it's not algorithmic learning. It's another term, but where you can have a computer essentially play something and learn and kind of guide itself.
Oh yeah,
you know?
I mean, deep learning and like convolutional networks and all that. Yeah.
So I think the other thing, yeah, well maybe, but I think the other thing that we'll see is that people, talking about the experiences that people will want, one of the experiences will be something like Skyrim, in the sense that the companions will be fully interactive. The game will just actually have incredibly detailed chatbots that will interact with you as if you're a real person, or provide that illusion. And in doing so, the addictive thing about that will be that, as in Skyrim, you are the center of the universe, right? So everyone you encounter in Skyrim right now looks at you as the Dovahkiin, you're the Dragonborn. So everyone you encounter is like, "Oh, Dragonborn, you're amazing," and your companions are like, "Oh, you're so awesome," and like everyone is doing, "You save the world, we love you." So combine that sort of experience of this world is designed so that everyone is basically telling you how awesome you are, and then imagine that you make those NPCs who are telling you how awesome you are convincing enough, you know, chatbots or whatever you program them. There are going to be a lot of people who are not satisfied with their real life interactions, who are going to feel very emotionally fulfilled if I can go into, you know, I guess Skyrim 2.0, and literally I arrive and I walk in the door and it's like cheers, right? All these NPCs turn around and say, "Hey, Laozi, it's great to see you. We love you, man. What have you been up to?" You know, and I can have these conversations with them. All of a sudden, I'm having fulfilling conversations with AI. And again, they never argue with me. We never have disagreements. They're never telling me, you're stepping over the line. They're like, "That's great, man. Whatever you want. We love you," you know?
Okay,
and
that's sort
I
of
can see that being incredibly, that can be very addicting.
The health community basically, you know, determines what's healthy based on kind of what everybody like agrees is healthy. Like, they say, okay, you know, everybody is most fulfilled by having like meaningful social relationships. Therefore, that's the healthiest thing. I mean, if our society progresses to the point where like we're all in a virtual environment where you know, like we're all doing everything online and we're all playing these games and like we're being, you know, our best
and super
selves
advanced
as
bots are
individuals.
telling us how awesome we are. Like, why would I even need a friend like you? Because I have 10 other friends who are all telling me, you know, "Oh, you're so great," you know. So I don't know. It's like, scary in a way. So.
Well, kind of, but like it seems like to an individual, if you got deep enough, like you could get, you know, a satisfying enough experience for an individual person, but it seems like the collective of humanity would suffer, and or like it would be diminished, and would that matter at that point?
Yeah, that's the question. So you want to try to get some more folks who got a line forming. That was the last thing I wanted to bring up, so we can just go kind of freeform from here.
All right, so this kind of ties into what happened in Ready Player One. So you remember there was the uncle and the aunt, right? You know, they weren't very nice people to him. So you remember how the uncle...
Yes. You're talking about the movie or the book?
The movie. So you remember you remember the uncle, and he said he spent money on upgrades, and then he said he spent all their money for the house. So then that kind of got me thinking, right? If you can make money in-game that ties into real-life money, couldn't that technically become a new job, and a lot of people would spend time like that?
Yeah. And a lot of people would lose their money virtually too. Just look at any game, like any social web game, like what's anything made by a while ago. What was it, Mafia Wars or something? There were people who would spend like their life savings in something like Mafia Wars, or you know. So multiply that experience by a computer, a studio that figures out Skyrim 2.0 and has microtransactions. You know, you could easily have someone spending lots of money. Yep.
High Fidelity already has virtual currency that can be like extracted. I mean, Second Life does it too, but Hi-Fi is a metaverse platform. So
Yep.
I mean, what's interesting about though is that ultimately, like all resources and all value will come from our physical resources. I like it's you like as appealing as it is to think about like a system where you go into VR and you make money in VR and everything. Like just the laws of thermodynamics mean that like value is going to have to come from somewhere. You can't have a closed system or a perpetual loop.
You spend
so
your
we're gonna
VR
have to
money on
interface-
Amazon, and Amazon drones deliver your food.
Yeah.
No more
We're gonna
no more
have to
personal interaction. It's unneeded.
interface with the outside world at some point through some circuitous method.
Another thing kind of with that though is that you notice, the evil company, and that you notice how they started to force people to work for them, like they had electrical stuff
Yeah.
going. Do you think that could become a problem if that's how it worked?
I could, yes, absolutely. Basically, because you have the existing precedent already for gold farming, and it's not forced. But as an example, once the economies and the economies in MMORPGs, once they realized that people would pay real money for in-game gold, there were a number of employers in countries everywhere, not to single out any particular country, where they would just get a bunch of cheap computers and have kids come in and work for like a small amount, where they play 10 to 12 hours a day or longer farming virtual gold, and then they would sell that gold for real money. So if there is a platform that becomes ubiquitous enough, say Facebook's platform becomes ubiquitous enough that everybody wants to be on it, there is a virtual currency, and that currency is farmable, it's absolutely plausible to me that people will set up VR server, VR computer farms, and kids will go in and work for minimum wage farming virtual currency that they can then turn around and sell on whatever market for people who want to play Facebook's app or whatever and don't have time to farm it themselves, so they can buy virtual goods. So yes, the idea of that seems perfectly plausible to me.
All right,
Interesting thoughts. Thanks, Hep.
I just had a small, small aside, and it's kind of silly, but no spoilers for anybody who's seen it. But there's an episode of Black Mirror that we watched last year as an in-game group that touches on this whole immersion and being the center of the universe and playing a role that you want to play in a constructed
Is that
context.
The Star Trek one?
Yes.
Well, Star Trek did an episode
it's in season 4. It's the first episode of season 4.
Yeah.
Have you seen that episode?
So anyway,
I have not.
It's
I've heard about
it's cool if you haven't seen it before.
Okay, it's a really good
Black Mirror.
It's a really good episode, and given that your experiences with Skyrim and with the NPCs, especially with the NPCs, I think you would find a lot of interest in that episode, because it's basically all about that, a player's interaction with the NPCs that he's created. It's really good.
So shall we discuss reasons why we should stay in the real world for a bit of a topic change?
I suppose. I don't know. Are there any? What are yours?
I mean, I have a lot.
Okay.
Tell us your reasons why you would not. Given the opportunity to jump into like Sword Art Online or something like that, or a very advanced VR system, you would stay in the real world. So what are your reasons for doing that?
I would stay in the world sometimes, but then I see like the advantages of staying in VR too. But then there's a lot of things you can't simply do in VR because like computations are difficult, or just that you can't emulate the experience properly. Currently, as it stands, we can't skateboard here. I mean, there's like really, really hard to get the forces right for the thing to work. For like snowboarding, most boarding sports, it's really hard to do.
Yes, right now that's hard to do, but in 10, 20 years, who knows?
Regardless of the computation limitations, you're still restricted to somebody else's imagination. Like everything you're doing in Skyrim was decided upon previously by a game designer. You're not doing anything new. You're not doing anything that hasn't been thought of already.
Well, so what are we discussing? Because I still feel like if the experience is compelling enough, then for me personally, I'm having fun. Like the options that I'm presented with are sufficient. I think so. Yeah, I'm not saying that it's going to allow everything. I'm just saying that I think people are going to be able to design applications that will be satisfying enough that they will be preferable for many to real life.
But just conceptually, that doesn't bother you. Like as a human being going throughout your life, if somebody else has dictated all of your actions before you even go do them, that's okay with you?
I wouldn't say it's okay or not okay. It's just something that I'm interested in as kind of a, because I think it's going to come. So I'm curious how how it will evolve, what people will think of it. So, and I guess it's going to be it's going to come down to what we as a society decide is healthy. Like we've already said, like if we say it's just if your emotional needs are met and you essentially are happy, right? You're getting the happy button in your brain hit enough. Maybe we say that's enough. Maybe as long as you're not nutritionally challenged.
No, I'm not. I'm going to say
I'm not arguing.
Satiety. Emotional satiety is not the only thing because there's also self-sovereignty. Just
I'm
as a
asking the
conscious
question.
being
I'm
in the
not
world.
making the argument. I'm asking the question of also everyone here if they think that would be sufficient. I think it could be for some people, but not for everyone.
Ooh, let's do a vote. Okay, so if
that's a good idea.
If a game world was made satisfying enough, think of Ready Player One, think of Sword Art Online, think of like a really rich world that would let you really explore and live in it, but that somebody else designed this game. Do you think that would be sufficient for you to spend the majority of your time in? Thumbs up if yes, thumbs down if no.
Question.
Got a lot of thumbs up.
That is a lot of thumbs up. Got a couple over there. Thumbs down. Yes. Had a question somewhere. Who said question? Somebody said it. What's up?
I got just a quick comment.
Should we be in the same world like Ready Player One, where everyone lives in poverty?
Yes. Oh, would the real world be like that? I think it's quite possible. It could be. I'm not saying it would, but.
That is introducing other variables. That complicates the question. Maybe, but like that goes back to like if the individual is satisfied enough, then maybe collective humanity will fall apart and it'll be fine.
Maybe we won't care.
We're all just it'll be like the Matrix, like where we'll all be Cypher and we'll all be interested in our dream world and there won't even be a society. We'll just be plugged in and it'll be fine.
Catapult had a comment over there.
Poplapo, like you were saying, somebody made this one, game, so basically you're restricted to whatever this person imagines. Now, imagine this, and I can see this happening in a few years. Google Earth. You go into Google Earth and you can drop into any city, any street, and whatever, and walk around that street.
I mean, that
With
sounds
it being
great.
interactive, other people are walking, cars are actually moving, and stuff like that.
I just don't think this stuff's possible without a fundamentally different computing model. But don't we have a line of people here still waiting to talk?
Yeah, we got a pretty
There's-
decent amount.
Should we go to the next person?
You want to go through?
We'll get there, Joey. Thank you. All right, Super.
Alright, so I got a weird statement to add on to this. Have you seen what Japan has done with alarm clocks?
With what?
Alarm clocks?
Yes.
The holograms, the built-in holograms.
Yes, the built-in
waifu in a box.
holograms where you can
The waifu in a
download.
box. Yep.
Yes, where you could download a character like mine. Don't you think that that's going a little out of the way to the creep side?
Oh, but no, it's inevitable. Are you kidding?
Another episode.
People have been doing that, have been imagining this since time immemorial, in tons of different animes. It was going to happen, and it's just going to get worse. Are you kidding?
That is another application for you. Remember? Remember I was talking about the NPCs who think you're the best thing in the world. That will also be an aspect of that. I guarantee it. And if not, it will be modded in.
that was basically the end of my question because
you have correctly interpolated human nature. You are correct. Freeman.
Hi, Freeman.
Hello. Yes, I mean we're talking about the 10+ years future, but what do you think it's the most important thing to happen to VR in the next say couple of years? Would you say what will make our experience better?
What do you think, Popopo? I mean, I have an immediate thought, but I'll let once you.
My immediate thought is more dynamism. As good as VR chat is now, the really really dynamic parts of it are the avatars. I don't want just the avatars to be dynamic. I want the world to be something that I can interact with and something that gives me feedback.
Yeah, for me, I think the biggest in the next 10 years, I think it's just going to be the ease of access. That's going to be the biggest thing that's going to drop that will cause the next big spike. So the Oculus, of course, the Quest. The Quest is the next step toward ease of access because it's completely self-contained. So 10 years from now, we're talking the Quest on steroids. It's something I buy it in a box as I would a TV. It's just a box. I open it up, I put on the headset, bam, photorealistic VR. And then at that point, everybody has it, because why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I don't have to have a computer. I don't have to have a space set aside. I don't have to have, this ridiculous. Oh, it'll also be extremely inexpensive. We may even take losses on it. Like someone like Facebook, if you guys are familiar with the console model, Sony and Xbox, when they were releasing their consoles, and even before Nintendo, would often take a loss on the console. They would sell the console for less than it cost to make because they would make that money back in games. So I could easily see a company saying, hey, we're going to release a super good VR headset. We're going to sell it at a loss, but we're going to put you on our network, again, Facebook or whatever, where we have all these microtransactions, all these things for you to buy. And I guarantee you we're going to make our money back in spades because we got you the headset.
Yeah. I think the most important thing is finding a sustainable and a profitable economy for VR.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, within 10 years, that's the big step forward.
Both you and Syke seem pretty gung-ho about the Quest, but it's not going to have any processing power worth crap. What? How is that going to be?
No, but we're saying 10 years. This is literally from what we had. Do you guys remember when did the Rift come out? When was the Rift first released? Does anybody know? This guy, Lat, you raised your hand.
2017. 2016?
2011, 2012.
16 was the commercial version, wasn't it?
Okay, so commercial version 2016.
Was the dev version, right?
Yeah. Well, let's go by commercial version. So commercial version of the Rift 2016. In 3 years, 2019, we have progressed from the commercial version of the Rift, low res requires a wired computer, to Oculus Go, 6 degrees of freedom, completely self-contained. That's 3 years. Give it another 5, give it another 10. It's going to be. We're going to have. I think it's going to progress very quickly.
I would say.
Same man who came from Atari.
If we could, I think if VR can break into the console market, get into people's homes, that's it.
PSVR.
Yeah.
Oh.
PSVR is going to be another. Yeah, it's kind of a gateway thing, but yeah, PSVR is also doing a lot to introduce people. All right, let's get the Iron Dawn.
Iron Dawn.
Hello. We're focusing so much on the inside of actually coming into the VR world, when also what we could actually also incorporate into the VR is using the full body and tracking to help in the real world with mechanized rescue bots and connecting to them to biohazard fire inspects and search and rescues when they're hazardous to the human body.
Yeah, I think all those applications will be there, right?
Yeah, I'll get our mechs out there to do all the work where we're going to be comfortable in VR, and we'll just send the robots out to where we can pilot them. That sounds great.
As soon as the military
at the point though, we're technically almost there. It's just the point of the battery, because we already have motion control arms and stuff and head movement as is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think there will be a lot of additional, VR has a ton of applications, as does AR. They both have a ton of applications outside of entertainment. But I think what we're talking about is all those other applications will be there. I just think that entertainment will be a large sector, just like we have video games now, flat screen games. We still have all these other uses for those same processors, but video gaming is a large use. And I think with VR, it will be a large entertainment use, and it will take up a significant portion of your time.
If you think about growth, our entertainment industry right now compared to 50 years ago, compared to 50 years before that, it's just a spike, it's just it's an interesting pattern. Anyway.
There's also been some interesting studies done about video games specifically where in downturn, if you have an economic downturn, entertainment is actually one of the last industries to be hit by the economic downturn. If people have less money, there will a lot of other industries start to tank, but video games or whatever actually tend to be one of the most recession-proof, because people will scrape and save just to get a little entertainment, just to get an escape.
That goes back to the emotional health thing too. That could be an argument that we are using it to we're using entertainment to cope. That's our that's our way to engage with the world in a way that keeps us at least somewhat emotionally engaged.
Yeah. Well, Iron Dawn, did you have anything else?
I was just
okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joseph.
Hello.
Hello, Joseph Knight.
Hello.
Yes. So users of VR among general population, probably
1-2%. I'm pulling these numbers out of the air. Gamers,
right now, yeah,
let's
absolutely.
be generous, 10-12%. I don't know.
I think 1 and 2
How
is
do
more
you
accurate.
get VR adoption to some real significant fraction, 25, 30, 50%? What will bring all these other people who are otherwise skeptical?
Well, that's what you were just talking about. That's the out-of-the-box headset. That's the headset that's available 5 to 10 years from now. That's extremely cheap, and yeah.
But what are they going to do?
So, yeah,
There will
I
be
think
apps.
that's kind of
there will be stuff that appeals to them.
I think that's kind of the question, though. Like,
yeah.
like
so,
we
well,
don't,
we
don't really know yet. Well,
Let's,
okay,
so,
hold on. Let's look at what's already happened, which is the internet. So, like, everybody is on the internet, pretty much. I mean, you know, the vast majority of people. And so, like, so whatever it is that, if VR is to be successful someday in the same way, like, it's going to have to provide the same experience that the internet provides, which happened, like, in the fiction, in the VR fiction. You're shaking your head. You don't think that's possible?
No, I just don't think that's the answer, but I want to hear you out.
Oh, well.
I don't know what the answer is. I think it has to be something different than, oh, it's the internet. You know, if you say, provide what the internet does and everyone will come.
Yeah.
Well, we have the internet. Why would they come to VR?
I believe social communication is the thing.
Mm-hmm. So, Albo, you think social is going to be
because
what
they could be a Shiba
expands the VR user base?
That sinks through the floor.
Yeah.
Well, that clearly works for you, Pika. I don't know that it works for everybody.
And I would say that Facebook would agree with you, Alboy, that social is going to be the big VR boom. That's what they're betting on.
Okay, Joseph.
But we have
Facebook. There is a point to exploring
Not that
being the kind of person you want to be, like having the body you want through VR.
Do you think?
Yeah, but again, like, that's not
Maisie, do you
necessarily going
think
to work for
50% of
everybody.
people want to explore some other embodiment than what they currently have?
No.
I think people would. I think the huge thing would
1-2%.
be explore, traveling the world and making a dream home and visiting maybe in real time Paris and London, visiting your relatives and experiencing movies and interactive games and things in 3D.
Everybody has a different appeal. There's, is there one killer app, 2 killer apps?
I think there's a multitude. You cater to you have everything available. Like I said, fantasy, sci-fi, rockstar, travel, anything that you can imagine that is available. People have put it into VR, so it appeals to some niche, and they find a way to monetize it.
My thesis is that one killer app will break the ice, and will reach 20. Thank you. 30% saturation. I will mute now because I have to go answer the door.
Okay.
Thank you, Joseph.
Yeah, thanks for your comments. I actually like.
Oh, do you want to get Joey real quick?
Well, yes, but to that point, like, I think like real engagement, I think on a world scale, like majority scale, might not happen until we get those neural plugins where it's not like we're like putting on a headset. It's like we're in a dream world, which doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility for me. But I don't know.
Holodeck.
Holodeck.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
All right, Joey Parcels.
Well, I think there's probably answers to that sooner than having to get to that extreme of neural implants. I think the UX, the experience of VR still has a lot to be worked out still. And you know, it's when somebody comes along, I think, that makes that experience so fluid and so simple for everyday people and seamless for everyday people. That's sort of like one big milestone that needs to be crossed still that we haven't crossed with VR just yet.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is, for example, here in VR chat, I don't live in here. You can ask Pickapedi, we know each other. He
we can see
tries to get me to come in.
You're a casual user, your name tag.
I'm a casual user, yeah, and because I don't feel compelled enough right now, and I understand I'm a tough sell because I've been doing this stuff for a long time, but still there is a point to it, right? There's a point that here in VR chat, if you were to use me as representing some kind of everyday person in the general public, we're not feeling compelled enough right now by this, right? It's compelling to a point, right? When I first came in. And this is awesome, right? We're partying with each other and we have a good time. But then beyond that, you know, the world itself, like you said, isn't responsive. It's very static. It's very, hollow. So I think that, the question is, like Joseph said, how do you give people the purpose of something more to do here, something more reason to be here? And I'm wondering what's taking VR chat so long to get there, honestly. So
remember, it doesn't have to be here.
I think that's one thing.
It could be multiple different apps. Like you may come here to socialize with your friends. This could be like your loading room. This is where we get together. And then we can go play something like Orbis, or we can go play whatever experiences there are.
Yeah.
We almost go into a separate app. So, and that
with VR,
that would be
I have this hunch that it'll be a signal organizing. Some giant company is going to get gigantic like Google with a single organizing metaverse that everything happens within,
Yep. That's what Oculus wants with their store, and that's what Viveport wants. They haven't done it, but that's what they want. So yeah,
I see these guys, VR chat, as having the greatest potential for that, and I'm wondering if they're thinking that way and if they're moving in that direction, because that's their greatest potential for what they can do here.
Yeah, they're.
I've got more, but I'll stop there. What's that?
Yeah, we actually
its content.
Okay, so thank you, Joey. We're gonna get one more person, but our time's about up. So go ahead, random guy. What you got for us?
He's got a squeak. Thank you. I don't speak squeak.
Okay, you've got memes? Is that
I
what you
wanted
got
to do
for
that
us?
to the camera guy. So, anyway, let's talk about VR podcast. Since VR chat is basically the most popular social game, do you think folks would do VR podcasts where they do what you're doing right now with a small audience in this room, a Twitch chat room, and someone who does the camera like this guy right there? Do you by any chance think that the generation of podcasts is changing as we speak?
I mean, that I'm not sure. I obviously like Endgame. We do this, consistently, but one of the most powerful things about podcasts, how they are now, is that they are an individual experience. They're private. I feel like the podcast community in general, most people tend to listen by themselves, and I don't know, that's one of the things that I think works so well about the internet, is that everyone can experience it collectively, but also individually. It's asynchronous, and that's actually, I don't know, that's one of the tougher things about VR, is that we have to experience a lot of it together if we're going to have cohesion, in, I guess, in kind of a societal way. I'm getting off on a tangent, but I think VR for sure has just amazing creative potential. There's a million things that people could do with it, whether with podcasts or theater, which hasn't been explored yet, or all games, more and more different types of games, and there's just a million different directions to go with it that I think hasn't even been touched as as exploration yet.
Lazy.
All right.
Your thoughts?
Does that answer your question? Oh, no, I was hopeful summed it up. I actually don't listen to a lot of podcasts, so that's why I was going to let you take that one.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I think podcasts are great. And just content in general. People are creating content more and more. Streaming is taking off. Selfies are still living strong over here in VR as well as in real life, so that's good. By the way, we can hear every time your camera goes off, so just be considerate about that. Please.
Just consider them paparazzi. It's great. Thank you.
Oh, well, but they're taking pictures of themselves. If the attention were on us, that would be fine. But they're taking pictures of themselves.
Thank you, random guy.
Oh,
thank you for
thanks,
your
random guy.
Me of the selfie
the picture.
People in my class. My class usually does that.
Okay. All right, so we're about wrapping it up. Does anybody have a sentence as a nugget for this topic that we?
I don't know.
Laozi, do you
have plenty questions? Didn't want to waste time, so.
Okay, well, just to wrap it up, I guess, keep exploring realities out there, and I don't know. We'll see if it can ever.
Yeah.
We'll see if it can ever match the real world.
Yeah, if we want a final thought, I think I want to say that based on what we've discussed, I think that not everyone will be in VR full time once it gets to that point, but I think enough people will be. I think, and again, this is just bringing back to the beginning point. Playing Skyrim VR and getting involved in it just made me think that this is not the experience that gets people to be in VR full time, but this is the prototype. This is the proof of concept. Something like this taken to a much more advanced level with a much more advanced interface will be the thing where people say, I would rather be in this, and then I'll get out of it to sleep and eat, and then I'm going to spend all the rest of my time in this, whatever that is.
Yeah.
So that's how I would close out.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks everyone. I'll turn off security and all right, come up here for a group photo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Group photo. Are you grooming? Are we grooming Pika? It's all groom Pika. Yeah, we're grooming you.
Oh. Ooh. Chunky, get up here.
Thanks everyone, and thanks Buster for filming.
I didn't expect you to enjoy being groomed quite that much.
Sorry, I was doing something on Twitter.
Or whoever you are.
Everybody
Okay,
smile.
once this is done, can you activate the security thing so I can see how that works?
How it works? Okay, hold on. We're taking a picture. Oh, yeah.
This is
Like,
not real.
choose your
Or is it?
Does everybody want to yell plus Roda?
Roda.
Reality.
Reality.
God dang it, random in your timing.
Please tell me that was a good take. I don't want to stand here and smell that.
What? I have a Shiva in front of me. But
Well, that's random for you.
Cool.
Ghoster will fix that in post.
All right, thanks everyone.
literally just missed it.
Ghoster will fix that in poster.
I only attended half of the speech.
You need
so it was
assistance?
nice.
Hello.
My friend was asking me about
You
modeling.
need some assistance?
I could be.
cool.
No. Oh, there he is.
Wait, what?
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
What was that? What did that say?
470 something odd hours in VR, correct?
Yeah, he is.
And VR chat.
What did it say?
479 hours in VR chat since
Oh,
February.
sometimes that pop up for no reason at all.
So.
Okay, so we're saying almost like 800 plus hours in VR alone to have that kind of otherworldly simulation with this much interactivity. Hell, even in VR chat, the ability to move your legs like we do is something pretty amazing. But this one right here probably has spent over 2,000 hours.
I gotta do this.
Close enough.
7.
Clearly, Commander Shepard.
15.